I'm delighted to say Andy McEntee is with us. Andy, good morning to you. How are you?
Oh, good lads, yeah. How are you guys?
Shane was making the point it's a slightly shorter journey from Dunboyne to Dublin than it is to training in Antrim. But then I passed the M50 and there's like the big sign for the Titanic, 90 minutes from here. I'm like, that's not too bad.
It can often take me 90 minutes to get in here, so it can. Okay. So, I mean, you know, and it's a good road, so it's not the worst journey in the world.
You've got a slightly down week this week in terms of there's no game for you at the weekend and you get to sit and watch potential opponents knock lumps out of each other. So time to take stock from the campaign so far. It's been fairly incredible for you guys from the Tailteann Cup perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, incredible is probably a bit strong, but I mean, it's been decent. Yeah, the important thing I think for a team at our stage of development is getting games and getting games that you can be competitive in. So you know, it's worked out nicely. You know, getting a little bit of momentum behind us is important. We
would have spoken before when you were Meath manager about the fact that you would get beaten in Leinster by Dublin, and then you'd go through the qualifiers and the lessons that you were learning and absorbing would be over, while all the rest of the teams in the country who were slightly better than you were getting weeks of good warm weather training and the opportunity to embed plans for the next season. So you were starting next season at a handicap for being knocked out this season.
Yeah, the gap was always getting a little bit bigger, you know, unless you got a good run in the qualifiers. But I mean, we found we were trying to close the gap on Dublin as it was pretty much all the time, and yet they were getting to work together for an extra couple of months and getting extra games and extra training, and you know, our season comes to a sudden end, and you're finding yourself a little bit further behind nearly every year.
So what's your instinct about the arguments that we're seeing? The Sam Maguire is too long and convoluted to get 12 teams into 16, and Tailteann Cup is less convoluted, I guess, because more teams go out. But it seems to me it's kind of missing the point of trying to level the playing field for counties.
Yeah, I think it is. Certainly is for the Tailteann Cup. No, there's only one less team going out in the Tailteann Cup because of New York's involvement. But you know, for teams, you know, in Divisions 3 and Divisions 4, you need to be together. You need to be staying together, and you need to get games. You need to get a bit of momentum if you want to make progress. So I think people are missing the point a little bit. I mean, I get what they're saying. You have all these games just to eliminate 3 or 4 teams. But if you want to see inter-county, if you want to see the best players playing on a regular basis, you got to provide a platform for them. Now, I've long complained about the provincial structure. I mean, I think the answer to a lot of people's problems is, I mean, you have a senior and you have an intermediate championship, and you have Divisions 1 and 2 playing the senior, and Divisions 3 and 4 playing the intermediate. So 16 and 16, and it's
almost like the numbers work out.
Almost. I mean, if you thought long and hard about it, you might think
if you were to design numbers for a system, this would kind of be perfect.
Yeah.
Although GA missing the trick with the calendar, Andy, like in terms of you look at July and August, especially when the All-Ireland final is a little bit earlier, I guess you've got an opportunity there where you're not competing against soccer and rugby, and there's a gap there where maybe the GA could lean into.
Oh, I mean, I think, again, I've had this conversation, I think, with you guys before as well. I mean, I think we are missing it. I think GA are missing a trick. I mean, we've offered up prime time to, you know, and as you say, when rugby and soccer are at their lowest, and we have a captive audience, and we're not getting to see the best players in the country playing the games that we want to see them play. So there's a big rush. I mean, we end up playing National League games in end of January, February, when it's too bloody cold to go and see them, and arguably some of, you know, the consequences of not performing in the league are dire in some places, and the most important games of the year can often be played in February and March, when realistically they should be played in the summer.
Yeah. And so now you've been through the experience of the Tailteann Cup group stages and a league campaign with Antrim. The inconsistency in the team in the league seems to have been worked out by the time you got to the summer. And maybe it hasn't all been worked out, but certainly you made big strides.
Yeah, I mean, some of the inconsistencies. I mean, we from the highs of beating Cavan to the lows of not showing up against Westmeath, and I suppose that can happen any team. But the games that really probably hurt us more in the league were the last minute defeat to Down and to Fermanagh. And had we have I suppose just goes to show how tight every division is in the league. Had we have come through those two games, you begin into the last game playing for promotion. So you'd like to think that we've ironed out some of the problems, and I suppose last weekend we would kind of turn the tables a little bit on Fermanagh, in that we were the ones who came from behind and got a couple of late scores.
In previous seasons, and not to labour the point here, but Antrim would have potentially gone out against one of the Division 1 teams in the first round of Ulster and then into the qualifiers, whereas now next season you're starting the season from an equal footing from all the other teams in Division 3 at least, depending on how many more games you get in the Tailteann Cup, and it could be as many as 3, and so you're just starting off a much better base and everybody has confidence because you've played in summertime, and it's a nicer thing to do, I suspect, for young men to get some reward for spending all the bleak midwinter training sessions to actually play in sunshine. Yeah,
I mean, I think that the ratio, people would have said the ratio of training to games has always been a little bit skewed, when you think about it, and there is a bit of payback for guys who put in a lot of long hard hours, in bad weather conditions and doing all the things that they're asked to do. Same for every county, but the prospect of us, the prize for getting a result in the next game is getting into Croke Park, and for a group like the Antrim fellas, I think that'd be huge. Certainly a big motivating factor. What
was the target at the outset of the Tailteann Cup, Andy? Because you see even the goals that you're buying in the 3 group games, it's consistent. It might sound like a stupid question, but was the target to win the Tailteann Cup? Was it to get to a certain level? Was it just to improve the style of play, or what was the focus?
Well, I think no more than the league, I think every team in the Tailteann Cup could stand back and make a case for themselves for being reasonably successful. Now, how far that goes, nobody can really tell. But yeah, we looked at it as I certainly looked at it, and the players, in all fairness to them, absolutely bought into this. We looked at this as a competition that we can be competitive in, and with a favourable wind, you could go reasonably far in it.
Presume a final against Meath is the ultimate. Would you rather avoid that, or would you absolutely embrace it?
Oh, I'd rather avoid it now, if at all possible, But I guess it would mean that Meath would be winning, and it means we would be winning. So the downside of it would be a couple of weeks of discomfort, I guess.
Positives.
Yeah.
The style of play is something that I've heard a couple of the players talk about as well, and even just the focus, the added focus maybe since Andy McEntee left on strength and conditioning and fitness, and I know that seems to have been a focus, and clearly, late in games it's paying off for Antrim as well, that focus.
Yeah, I think the lads have put in a lot of work, really. In Robbie Bremner and Brendan Murphy, we have 2 really good guys. We have the facilities there, and I think the lads, it is starting to pay off. But I mean, that's one of the basic ingredients of the modern game, is you got to be physically able for it. I mean, last Sunday was tough going. So it was 25 degrees and very hard ground, and fortunately enough, we had enough guys still well able to make the runs late in the game.
The injuries have been something else, like when you see and the hard pitches don't help. Was it easier for you coming in a sense that I think Antrim lost a number of players from last year's panel, that whether it's to travel or whatever else, or maybe players just come to the end of their careers, but it's more of a clean slate maybe for you coming in from the previous tenure?
Yeah, there was a number of guys for various reasons, as you say, injuries, just reached that stage in the career, one thing another. There was a lot of guys not involved this year that would have been involved last year, and still a number of fellas who are involved but unfortunately have had long-term injuries. The lads of Paddy McAleer and Kevin Small, and unfortunately Ryan Murray now as well. They're long-term injuries, but they've been great fellas to have around the place, and have shown great interest and given great encouragement to a lot of the younger guys.
Antrim has big playing numbers and a huge population base, and obviously not everybody's interested in playing Gaelic football, but for those who are, there are still big numbers, and it always felt like there's the potential there for it to be a bit of a sleeping giant if they were to get the systems in place. Do you feel like some of those systems are beginning to bear fruit, or there's still work to do at that level too?
I think there's work to do. I think you can change body shapes, because it's just kind of a straight line equation. The more you run, the better you get. Trying to change mindset is a little bit different, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of that with the lads. They're going out with an expectation that they can perform at this level, and that they can succeed. But I think structures, underage structures, a lot of really good work being done up there, and it'll probably take a little while yet to bear fruit. The club scene is very competitive. And perhaps could do with a little bit of tweaking to maybe help the county scene, because there's always a little bit of I suppose, I wouldn't say friction, but there's always a little bit of a tug of war between club and county, and trying to maybe get a better balance for that, I think would help in the longer term.
Is that looking at something like they do in Monaghan, where they have the start games and all the county players are only available for the start games, but everybody else, and the games continue and everybody knows the story at the start of the year, something like that?
Yeah, something like that, and maybe not in so much of a rush to get leagues started. And maybe then the connection between league and championship, your status between in championship is in some places dependent on what division you're in the league. So in that regard, teams that provide more players for the county setup
aren't punished.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, that you can see why then players are like, you can't go to this game this weekend because we need you for this game, but it's just a random, it seems on the face of it to be a run-of-the-mill league game, but ultimately it might impact their ability to play senior championship.
Yeah, and everybody has to appreciate that. I mean, the club is very important to everyone.
You mentioned the heat there last week at the match, Andy, and I was in Clones myself, and it was similar. I noticed even just there's water bottles being shared between players constantly. Kieran Donnelly had the Fermanagh manager interesting comments after the match, where he was like, he thought it was outrageous that there wasn't something organised, reactionary almost, that players playing in that heat, that there could have been something. Maybe it's a small issue, of course, but these things can crop up.
I suppose it's difficult for both. I could see maybe from a referee's perspective, maybe he's been graded and there's somebody watching him, and there's no official allowance made for water breaks. Both Kieran and himself agreed that we'd go with water breaks if the referee was open to that, and could well be that perhaps he compromises himself by doing something like that. I don't really know, but
sometimes you just need a little bit of common sense.
Well, the problem with common sense is that
it's uncommon.
Usually, yeah.
And also, I totally take your point that it's really difficult. But some dictator, surely somebody in the organisation can say, okay, these are unparalleled weather conditions, and so therefore we've decided that everybody's allowed a water break. Maybe if you're playing the Limerick Hurlers, you don't want to give them the water break because Connacht is such a genius.
Yeah, well, I suppose to give the referee his dues, he did say, well, look at it, if there's a natural break and play, get on the pitch here. You can get
right
now. Maybe
then if Antrim have scored 6 or 7 points on the trot, you don't want the break and play. Maybe
there you go. But I'd be very reasonable when it comes to things like that.
Very reasonable. How are you enjoying it?
Oh, I'm enjoying it. I mean, like anything else, like any other job, it has issues. I mean, there's always something to be dealt with. But
are you getting better at dealing with that stuff now? It's the second time around, like.
Yeah, I suppose it's also.
You're a bit tentative there.
I think no. I think I probably said this to you before, like when it was with Ballybowden, going back to Dunboyne and being able to leave it behind you makes it a little bit easier. And it's a little bit the same in in Dunboyne. I come back to Dunboyne, and there is a little bit of an Antrim fan base growing in Dunboyne, but it's a member, a lot of close friends. So I can leave a lot of it. You can leave a lot of it behind. You're not surrounded by it all the time, and that probably makes it a little bit easier.
And is the experience that you had with Meath as useful as you hoped it would be when it comes to dealing with, or was a lot of it specific to Meath? Do you know what I mean? Like, are there just tenets of the job that you can go, okay, I've got this box off my head, I know when this issue arises I'm going to be able to either outsource the problem or nip it in the bud quickly, and we can,
Yeah, I think a lot of the issues come up are individual. You got to deal with it. I mean, you do have. The club versus county thing is that's a common denominator everywhere, I'd say. Look at, you're learning all the time, So I mean, surely there's elements of my experience with me that I could bring with me and maybe benefit from up there. But in general, I'm very fortunate dealing with Donald Murphy as the treasurer and Ger McEntee as the chairman. I deal with two people, and that makes it an awful lot simpler.
Yeah. Whereas in Meath you're dealing with people in Trim and Navan and Ashburn walking down the street, and Dunboyne, everyone has their opinion, I guess, and 2 cents worth of thoughts on who should play, who should not play, and style to play.
For sure, yeah. And I'm sure it's the same up in Belfast, but I can't hear it from where I am. So, I mean...
Andy, last one for you. At the moment we can't work out who the best couple of teams in the country are for Sam Maguire. Do you have any inkling about who's going to do it at this stage?
Yeah, well, it's probably a little bit early. There's still a little bit of shadow boxing going on, I suppose, and no team has really grabbed it. Galway have had a couple of wins. I have a sneaking suspicion that Tyrone mightn't be too far off.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
In terms of that shadow boxing, right, how do you get them then to peak for the games when it really does matter? Like, is that about like being the emotion is dialed down a few percentage points for these games at the moment, and then you've got to dial that up for the knockout football?
Yeah, I'd say that's a possibility, but I don't think the shadow boxing is intentional. I just think there's no team playing particularly well on a consistent basis at the moment. Now the question is always, can you turn it on when you really need it? And I suppose that's where Dublin have been able to do that. They've been able to get through Leinster traditionally, quite easily. Same with Kerry. But Kerry haven't been able to turn it on, when they really needed it. I mean, I know they got across the line last year, but could very easily have not got across the line last year.
Yeah, Dublin nearly caught them, and then Galway nearly caught them.
Dublin nearly caught them, and a couple of late decisions made a big difference in that game against Galway. So I mean, I'm sure Galway. I mean, the two teams that I would think will probably be Galway and Tyrone.
Okay, and it's just in terms of the preparation for this year and the extended season, has it been straightforward to get your team to be as good as they can be for this period? Like, is that just an earlier in the year conversation with the physio and the strength and conditioning going, we need them to be super fit at this point, let's not kill them up until that point, but we need them to be peaking here and here?
No, I wouldn't have had that, because I mean, the truth of the matter is, for us, survival in Division 3 was huge.
Right.
So you can't say, well, look, we'll try and gauge this and make sure we're in the right spot come Tailteann Cup. And that's what I was saying earlier. I mean, those games in the league are so important to your whole season.
Well, it would have defined your first year. You're getting relegated to Division 4, but then you do well in Tailteann Cup. I was like, but we're playing Division 4 football next season.
Yeah, and very hard to turn around. I mean, if you find yourself in Division 4, there's every chance that the performances wouldn't be as good in the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's probably it's different for teams in Division 1s, but even if they're in Division 2, like, I know from a Meath perspective, your league performances weren't good enough to escape being in Tailteann Cup. And for a team, for a county like Meath with that tradition, that was huge. So they couldn't afford to be trying to sort of gauge it for a championship. Which
makes it a bit of a lottery now in the Tailteann Cup, and therefore really exciting and interesting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, we have a home game in Corrigan Park now on Saturday or Sunday week, and I'd like to think the place will be buzzing because there are a lot of really good, genuine GA people up there.
Yeah. And
if we could get that. The hurlers have certainly managed to get it, and I guess that has been the challenge that I put down to the fellas is, you know, we got to capture their imagination just like the hurlers did.
Yeah, well, best of luck with this. Continued success. Thanks, Andy, for joining us today.
Not at all. Thanks.
Cheers, Andy.
Cheers, man.
Andy McEntee there.